Hey, welcome to Mary Walter Radio, the podcast. I am Mary Walter. James Rabick, my work husband, producer, and co-host here, is out. But Bobby Burack, did I pronounce that right? Barack or Barrett? How you pronounce it?
No, you got it right. Usually people don't, so you're already off to a way better start than most people I discussed conversations with. Yeah.
Yeah, he is a journalist with Outkick. Also, are you a Fox? You're a Fox News contributor, I believe, as well. Correct?
Oh yeah, pop on here or there, but yeah, you can check us over at Outkick. I think our readers probably a fan of the show, Mary. I think we have a lot of things in common.
Good, good. So I'm so glad I got to first meet you when I was filling in for Brian Kilmeade on
Yeah.
Fox News Radio, and I really enjoyed our interaction. And we kind of connected through Twitter. And I said, "Hey, the next time James isn't here, would you mind sitting in?" And you just happened to be available tonight, so it worked out perfectly. So I'm super happy about that. Also, if for those of you who are new to the podcast, thank you so much. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like the podcast. You can go back and watch old ones. You'll notice that they have different colors. One is Life with Mary Walter, and that's on our Tuesday, 7:15. You watch the same way you do now, and that's everything but politics. So that's a lot of fun because we don't talk politics. And then this show is where we do the political stories. And, I like to try to do stories that you're not getting anywhere else, but there's just so much news that I don't think that's the way this show is going to go. Although, we're going to start it off with a column that Bobby wrote in Outkick. Just very quickly, also, this is available. The audio from this podcast will be available within 24 hours on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You could just download it. And I ask that you do. And as you know, I often ask you, just download stuff, just click it on YouTube or whatever. You don't have to pay any attention to it. Just let it watch in the background. Okay. I'm not above that. So, you just wrote this piece.
Yeah.
It's on Outkick, and you also have Substack as well, right?
No, I don't have a Substack. I'm a big fan of Substack, but no, I'm just on Outkick right now.
Okay. And this is so timely because there's some
Yeah.
news that we got this afternoon. And the news we got this afternoon was that Lisa Marie Presley was found unresponsive, without a pulse, on the floor at her home by her housekeeper. And her husband had just come home. Well, her ex husband, they still live together, had just come home from dropping the kids off at school when the housekeeper found him. He performed CPR on her. They called paramedics, but apparent cardiac arrest, had no pulse when they arrived, but they did apparently get a pulse going again. And they got her heart going again. And that's all we know as of right now. So she's 54, not super old. I mean, not as young as some of these other athletes you hear
Right.
about that are just dropping dead. No, they're just dropping over, a lot of them, and they don't get the
Right.
medical attention quickly enough. So you wrote a piece about this. So let me ask you, and we'll delve into it. But from where you're sitting, what do you think is happening here? What are the questions you have?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much background to this. I'm sure everybody watching and listening saw what happened to the Bills player a Monday ago. He just collapsed on the field. And I wasn't even as fascinated by that because he got hit in the chest. He went into cardiac arrest. I get all that. But there is a disturbing trend, Mary, of a lot of young people, particularly under the age of 35, either suffering cardiac arrest, cardiovascular symptoms, cardiovascular disease, or just suddenly dying. So I found that earlier in the week just so fascinating. Why are these numbers going up? So I went over to the official CDC.gov website and they said the same thing. Starting in 2021, we saw an increase in people under 40 suffering cardiovascular disease symptoms. I mean, that's pretty fascinating and ominous. So throughout the week, I'm looking over and trying to find people ask these questions. But then on Sunday, CBS asked Dr. Fauci what he thought of the development, and he quickly dismissed it as an inappropriate conversation. He said, "It's horrifying." I'm like, wait a minute. This is the guy who prides himself on following the science, yet he's dismissing a question about a trend that's seeing young Americans across the country suffer collapses, cardiac arrest, and they don't know why. Now, we can discuss all the possibilities, and maybe we will, but what is a fact is this is happening at unusual rates and nobody's asking any questions. The few people who are have been vilified by the likes of Fauci in the same corporate press who always tells us to shut up and suppress our
Right.
curiosity. So that was the thesis of this whole column was, wait a minute, we should be able to ask these questions because clearly something's going on right now.
Yeah, and just a very quick update on Lisa Marie Presley. Since when I saw that today, I was like, "Oh my gosh, we're going to talk to
Yeah.
Bobby about this tonight. This is crazy." She's in the intensive care unit on life support with a temporary pacemaker after suffering cardiac arrest. Sources say this is TMZ. She is in an induced coma and in critical condition. Now, that's what they did with Damar Hamlin. They put him
Right.
into an induced coma to try to let the body, take the stress off of the heart, try to let it recover and come back. But the big question for Lisa Marie Presley is how long was her heart not beating? And she wasn't getting oxygen to her brain, etc. And that's going to be the big question for her because we don't know how long she had been on the floor before she was found. I don't know if anybody knows how long she was on the floor before she was found.
Right, in that year of 2021, which was last year, we don't have provisional data for 2022, but estimations are that it's going to be high again. Well, what happened in 2021? That's when so many people had this novel, relatively experienced COVID vaccine. A lot of times they were forced to get it. Now, look, there's not definitive evidence that says the vaccine is responsible, but that definitely is a possibility given the unusual timing of 2021. Moreover, Dr. Peter McCauley, who discussed this conversation on the Tuesday following Hamlin's collapse, he cited data of a research center that found what was it? Well, 70% of the student respondents who took the mRNA vaccine showed some cardiovascular symptoms among the second dose and the booster. So again, this doesn't confirm anything, but it certainly raises suspicions that with nothing else, the vaccine needs to be ruled out. But the people who could rule it out, including Dr. Fauci, are refusing to even explore the thought that this is what's going on. I find that so concerning because if you're Fauci or you're anyone who prides yourself on following the science or being an expert or being a journalist, your main job is to consider all considerations and find
Right.
the truth. And that's not happening. They're saying, no, don't ask that, move on and consider something else. That's not the way science research or the medical industry has ever worked in an effective manner.
That's an excellent point. We can't when they tell me
Right.
that I can't ask the question is when I take my tinfoil hat on, I
Of
polish it up
course.
and I put it right on my head, right? That's why can't I question that?
Right.
Al refers to the movie Died Suddenly. It's a documentary. Sherry says, I'm so scared for all my friends who got the vaccine, I wouldn't take it. I think a lot of people feel that way.
Of
James
course.
says, I always wondered if the mixing of the different vaccines caused its own problems. That's a great question.
It
And we
is.
don't know the answer to that, right?
Yeah, I mean, people would go get Pfizer in their pharmacy or doctor or wherever they got it. They'd say, "All right, come back for your second dose." And someone would ask, "Well, am I going to get Pfizer again?" And they say, "No, you're going to get what we have, whether it be Moderna, Johnson and Johnson." That was less likely because it was only one dose originally, but obviously you needed so many boosters for this thing even to maybe work. So I think that's a valid concern if that's what they're asking about mixing Moderna, Pfizer, and in some cases Johnson and Johnson, because the bottom line here is this was rushed. This was a novel virus. So this was a novel vaccine. There's so much we don't know. So any concerns people have, whether it be cardiac arrest, blood clots, those are all valid concerns because we know some of that has happened. The question is to what degree, and there's no answers right now to find to what extent. So that commenter, I absolutely believe that that is a valid concern, and the mixing of the vaccines very well should be a conversation we should be having.
Absolutely. Let's see. Let's see. John here loves the conversation. Thank you, John. Ron says, have you guys been following all of Steve Kirsch's stuff on this? I have not. Have you?
No, I have not, but I'll definitely check them out because I'm always looking for people that add independent, informative thoughts. Because whenever these situations arise, the first thing I'm trying to do is get people who offer unique opinions, and you can never find that. Groupthink is
Mm.
so widespread over this. If you saw the reaction to Fauci's comments on Sunday, the vast majority of journalists had put in air quotes and Twitter accounts and social
Yeah.
media influencers, they all said, good thing to see Fauci put those right-wing kooks in their place and shut down the conversation immediately. Well, there's no conversation that should be shut down. You debunk a conversation with facts. You don't put that conversation off limits. So that's a complete indictment, not only on Fauci in science, but also the journalists whose job is to uncover these facts.
And what they're calling right wing was CBS's Major Garrett.
Right.
CBS is now right
Right.
wing.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. You come to this manipulation of the language. Right wing doesn't mean right wing anymore. Right wing usually just means they're inconvenient to the message we want to put out. So anyone can be called right wing. I mean, Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, the Washington Post declare them far right. They're both at least center left, if not very left, and hardcore long-term Democratic voters. But because they looked into what's going on in big tech, the Washington Post says they're far right. So just discount them immediately.
Well, the Washington Post. When I was living in Washington, D.C., I was actually living in Chevy Chase, Maryland, Friendship Heights, right on the edge, like literally 3 blocks of the D.C. line, 2.5 of the D.C. line. We would get every now and then the Washington Post for free. Someone would come through the apartment and they'd put it on everybody's doorstep. And I would bring it home to my real home, because I was just living there Monday through Friday in an apartment. I bring it home and we use it to start fires.
So I got to bring this up. So you might say CNN is the most dishonest outlet, or maybe MSNBC is the most overtly misleading and propagandistic. But I would argue, I think the Washington Post is doing the worst type of journalism I can find anywhere. I mean, you read their headlines, you have to wonder, are they serious? A couple of weeks ago, they declared the shark expert industry racist because there was too many, and I quote, not making this up, white guys named Mike judging sharks and not enough women of color. So shark expert industry is racist according to the Washington Post. I mean, you can't believe some of the headlines they come up with. And as far as I know, they're not satire. They actually are serious journalists. Which is wild, absolutely wild what that paper has become. And I actually, at one point, respected some of their hardcore reporting. At this point, nothing they say I believe. I take all of it with a grain of salt and actually assume they're lying to us.
Well, Trump broke their brains. Let's see, what else do we have here? Sherry says, I don't know why everyone says the vaccine isn't the main cause. That was the only difference in circumstances. Well, it could also be it could be COVID in and of itself, right? I mean, let's face it, it is a man-made virus. It affects everyone differently. Right. The losing taste and smell, freakiest experience in my entire life. And I had it in the morning, and then like a couple of hours later, I didn't have it. Right. It was weird as all get out, right. And then getting it back, and COVID fatigue and COVID fog, that part of it kicked my butt, but yet it doesn't affect other people that way. And now we're also finding that the more you're vaccinated, the more boosters you have, the more likely you are to get COVID again.
How can that be based on what we heard in early 2020? You get the vaccine, you're never going to get this thing. Right. Yeah, and to Sherry's question, look, and I laid this out in the column. It could be lasting COVID symptom, could be COVID, it could be the vaccine, it could be Adderall, it could be the increased pharmaceutical treatment of mental health disorders like anxiety and depression, right. which continue to skyrocket. We don't know, but that's the problem. We don't know, and the people who are oozing curiosity, which is what we're trying to do at Outkick and what Tucker Carlson did last week, those are the people being vilified. So I want to be very clear. I don't know what's causing this, but what I do know is there's a problem. It's growing, and the people in charge are not willing to look into it. I think the vaccine is a possible cause, but there's other reasons. But as of right now, they're not ruling anything out because they have no interest in finding that root cause, which is causing so many young Americans and people across the world to collapse and suffer cardiac arrest.
Think of the panic that would ensue, because a lot of people in this country were vaccinated against their will, because if they didn't get the vaccine, they couldn't feed their family, they couldn't pay their mortgage, etc. And how many people on the left didn't want you to be able to fly on a plane? They didn't want you to be able to grocery store. They were willing to be like the Chinese and bolt you into, board up your home so you could never get out and then you just die. That's how crazy these people were. So I think there's a lot of people who feel, I have this stuff in my body and I never wanted it. And now you're telling me that at any moment I could fall over, right? But I would think that there's also a period of time, and they're not telling us, like, okay, when was the last time Damar Hamlin had a vaccine? I want to know, like, what's the period
So
of
do
time?
I.
If you hit the 1 year mark, are you, fingers crossed, I made it a year, I'm safe? I don't have to worry about this? Or is this like the sword of Damocles that's going to hang over the head of every vaccinated person from now till the day they actually die?
Yeah, and unknowing is always the worst feeling you can have, whether it be any sort of medical condition. Not knowing, having that hover and loom over you is so detrimental and causes so much, ironically, anxiety of what we just talked about. And yeah, you're right. So many people did get the vaccine against their will, or they had to stay employed, to pay their bills, to pay their heat. I remember early on with the distribution of the vaccine, I had a friend call me, and they had just gotten Johnson& Johnson. They didn't want to, but their job mandated they get a
Yep.
vaccine to stay employed. And she had a young kid, so she had no choice. But she called me because that night on the news, there was rumors and news that Johnson& Johnson had caused blood clots, particularly in women of a certain age. So she's like, "Wait a minute. They forced me to put this vaccine in my body, something I don't trust, and now I'm hearing that it causes blood clots." That's such a terrifying thought and
Of
experience. So
course.
if they were to look into it and say, yes, this is causing inflammation of the heart and other cardiovascular diseases, I mean, there is going to be a panic. And I think that's part of why they don't want to look into it. And I think second is they're so afraid to admit they're wrong, particularly Fauci, who by all accounts helped fund gain of function research, which I would declare the most likely origin of this virus, or the
Hmm.
most likely
Well,
cause of this virus.
I mean, he said in front of Congress, though, that he
Yeah,
didn't. So, and he wouldn't lie because he is the
right.
science. Al says, my doctor said he's never seen so many blood clots. And I wonder if that
Yeah,
just depends. Part of me, I want to have a healthy dose of skepticism. I don't
yeah,
want to automatically go to, oh, that's the vaccine.
right.
It could be that because we're more aware of it
Right.
now, that and we're hearing more of the stories now, whereas if a football player collapsed in Idaho and you lived in New York, you didn't hear about it. It was just a blip, it
Mhm.
was just a blur. But now we're more attuned to it, so we're paying more attention to it. But what bothers me is, you note here, you go through a list of people, different
Yeah.
athletes who have collapsed, and it's always the cause of death is unknown. I don't accept that. I think if someone died
Right.
of a blood clot, a horror, big blood clot, that they would be able to tell that. So I don't buy cause of death unknown. I just don't.
Yeah, I don't either. And it's sort of ironic because we're all sort of engrossed in this Idaho murder case, and all throughout when they did not have a suspect, there was so much media pressure. Like, no, no, the family needs to know who did it. They need to have a motive. They need that information because they want closure and they want to know what happened. But when it comes to this, there's no demand to find out how did they die? How did that 18-year-old volleyball player all of a sudden just collapse and die? Why did that Air Force football player walk to class, suddenly collapse and pass away? Like, we should know. The fact that they say it's unknown is unacceptable, especially by the standards of a society that demands to know so much. When it comes to this, which is far more important than a lot of things we demand to know, there's no push and aggression to uncover the truth. And I just find
Right.
that backwards and a bit concerning.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Al says seeing died suddenly would have enhanced this conversation. Al is taking it personally that I have not had the time to
Right.
watch this yet. So I'm sorry, Al. I have a very busy life. I haven't had the time. I'll get there. John wants to know, did you hear about the new mRNA vaccine that will rebuild your destroyed blood vessels? I have not.
I have not too, and I wonder who's saying that because just like some, again, medical expert or media journal saying that it's going to rebuild something. Again, I just don't believe that, but that's pretty interesting. I have not heard
Yeah.
that one.
Sherry, there were many death investigations that I responded to in 2021 of elderly parent and their family members kept saying they were fine until they got the vaccine. So,
Yeah, again, you want to know why, and those answers aren't available. I think again, that's why I put the headline this piece, the suppression of curiosity. I believe the people who are most curious tend to be silenced the most. That's not how you run a society. that is based and rooted in factual information. What we have right now is an attempt to intercept just the spread of free knowledge and conversation, because so much is buried and so much nonsense that's not even news is amplified, like that somebody didn't get a job and they blame it on racism. That's the headline in the New York Times, not why young people across the country are collapsing.
Right. You have a great line here. You say, questions lead to information.
Yeah.
Thereby censoring questioning is censoring information. And
Yeah.
it's so simple and so true, and so many people refuse to see it.
Yeah, and the biggest criticism I got from, like, like left-wing blue checks in this column, they're like, "Well, we're not going to entertain your questions because we don't trust you." And the thing is, a question, you don't really have to trust the person asking the question. You're supposed to
Right.
trust the person giving the information. So
Right.
you can discredit me or Tucker Carlson or Peter McClawley all you want, but the people who you need to credit or discredit are the people who are supposed to be answering these questions. So to me, it's not about who's asking them, it's who's answering them and who's not answering these questions. And that's what really has me, I think, frustrated over this whole conversation, because when you kick Alex Berenson off Twitter for a year for questioning the mRNA vaccine, what you're doing is you're not just censoring him, you're censoring the answer that he wanted to bring to the forefront.
Exactly. And that's the point. That's the point
Right.
of it. So, we'll wrap this up, and I'm going to put a link to the piece in the description on YouTube and on the downloads. So you can go and read it for yourself, because it's a great piece. So if anybody wants to read it, I will have that information in the description for you when I'm done here, and you can just click on it and read it for yourself. Here's the other part of this, and the other reason I think people don't want the question asked, they don't want the answers, is there's no recourse. You can't get it out of your system. So you're stuck with it. That's number one. Number two, you can't sue your employer because employers did what the federal government was telling them to do, or cities were mandating. For instance, New York City mandated that you couldn't come back to work unless you had been vaccinated, right? So employers are off the hook. You can't go after your employer for threatening your job or saying, I have to fire you if you don't get this, right? They put in place what they were being told was the right thing to do. You're not going to sue the city of New York or wherever, and you're not going to sue the federal government. And you sure as heck can't sue Dr. Fauci. And if you do, you're going to get about 43 cents, because it would be the largest class action lawsuit in history. So there's no recourse to anyone for this. And I think that that's part of the reason that people are trying to, I guess, censor the outcome of this, or censor you from asking the question, because they can't make anybody the boogeyman.
Yeah, I agree that there is no recourse, there's no accountability here. I think that's a large part of it, why they don't want to answer the question, and why maybe more people aren't willing to ask it, because they're like, well, what can I get out of it? But what I think it just goes to show is that the power dynamic between how unpowerful the people are and how much power is instilled in the people at the top, because they're pretty much immune from any repercussions, where the people who are forced to get the vaccine, they all of a sudden have to experience these possible symptoms or worry about, hey, am I going to be next? Or the blood clots because of the
Right.
vaccine, or these cardiovascular symptoms because of the vaccine. And I have a line in the piece too that I think the suppression of curiosity and question only furthers the divide from the ruling class and the working class, who has less and less influence on the conversation over this entire pandemic.
Right. And James notes that don't forget, you also signed a waiver against the manufacturers when those people took the vaccine. I
Yeah, I
did not.
mean, there,
Did you really?
yeah,
I do not have. I am pure blooded, so I didn't sign anything, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it the old fashioned way. I'm just going to get COVID, which is exactly what happened, and I got my natural immunity.
yeah.
So you had to sign a waiver. Like, if they asked me to sign a waiver before they inject something into my body, I'm going to go, wait, what? What's
Right.
happening here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm reluctant to sign a phone contract because I have so little trust in the people who write up this stuff. So if that was me, I don't think I would have signed that. But yeah, again, I'm not really into giving anybody my signature, just because I think I have trust issues with anything that has to do with like big pharma or big business, or definitely big government.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. I was watching. CNN or MSNBC, I forget which one. And they were, I forget what they were talking about, but they were saying it's so interesting that now, the it was about investigating the Republicans saying they're going to investigate the FBI, the DOJ, we're going to get
Oh,
to the
okay.
bottom of all
Yeah.
these things. And they said, it's so interesting that the Republicans are doing that. They're the ones who were always for the government. They were always the ones who supported the government. And I'm like, yeah, and it's super interesting that Bernie Sanders, who was, peace and love and a hippie, back in the day and got married in Russia because he was so anti-establishment, now is the establishment.
Right.
And these people are all pushing for the government to take over your healthcare and your education. And they were all the liberals were all the ones who were for free speech. Now they're against free speech. It's like there has been a complete 180 in what the two parties stand for. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's why I always try to make comparisons to imagine telling one of your ancestors what's going on right now. They would say, wait a minute, the Republicans are doing that? Wait a minute, the Democrats are saying that? They wouldn't believe what has come of these two parties
Yep.
because of those change. Like you say, everything seems backwards, but I think just the new reality is everything is crooked because nothing really makes sense. And you've seen such a shift in what the two parties want. And it's such a great example about being for the government. And I love the Bernie Sanders reference. Whenever you bring him into an argument, it seems like it's always like, wait, that actually true? No, it's actually true. It's hard to believe that's actually the case. Look it up. Nobody's making it up.
Sherry says, I think Biden has got so many boosters that he's made up of 79% COVID vaccine now.
Yeah. I mean, some of the people that you talk to and they say, wait, I'm getting a booster. You're getting another booster. And I'll be
I
transparent.
know.
When this thing first came out, I planned on getting it. Then I thought, wait a minute, you have to get like 3 or 4 of these things a year just to maybe not get COVID. So by the time I was eligible to get it, I said, this doesn't sound like a vaccine. It sounds like a gene therapeutic that is pretty ineffective. So yeah, I mean, you have to ask somebody, if you have to get so many boosters, doesn't that defeat the purpose of getting this thing in the first place? Like clearly it's not working. Clearly you
Right.
don't feel confident that it's working. You just go back to what people thought in 2020 versus now. We were just misled from the start on every single detail of this vaccine.
Yeah. 100%. I know someone who just got his 5th shot.
Yeah.
Fifth. I'm like, dude, but he's super, super scared, is in the hospitality industry, so deals with people all the time. And I'm just like, and he's had COVID. So I'm like, why? What are you doing to yourself? But you know what? He also smokes. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, getting the vaccine boost, it's pretty much like getting a routine dental check, right? You go to the dentist twice a year, you have to get a vaccine twice a year. So pretty much no different than a cleaning as far as it goes right now.
Exactly. All right. Great conversation. As I said, I will put the link in the description. I want to talk to you about what happened today with now there being a special counsel investigating Joe Biden. Merrick Garland really, I don't think, had a choice. He had to do this. This had to happen. What I do have a question about, though, is the timeline. They knew now on April 4th that the archives were informed about the documents at the Penn Biden Center. That was
Right.
April 4th. That was just couple days, less than a week before the midterm election. But nothing was said about it. The 9th, the FBI launched an assessment. Nothing was said. We knew nothing. The 14th of November, Merrick Garland assigned John Lausch, who is doing the investigation, leading the special counsel into President Trump, assigned him to oversee an initial investigation. December 20th, Joe Biden's lawyers informed Lausch of the documents that were found in the garage in Wilmington.
Right.
January 5th, Lausch advised Merrick Garland that a special counsel was warranted. On the 12th, the lawyers for Joe Biden said, there's more documents at the Wilmington residence. Found some more. And then on the 12th, of course, Merrick Garland announced a special counsel, Robert Hur. So that to me is very curious because when we knew there were first of all, I have a lot of questions. How did the National Archives not know there were documents missing? That's number one. They knew documents were missing with Trump. How did they know documents weren't missing from the Obama White House? And where did they go? Right? That's that. So I have that question. When they found these documents at the Penn Biden Center, why was there not a raid on Biden's home? When they found that there were documents in the garage, why was there not a raid on Biden's other homes and the rest of the Wilmington house to find where these documents, where there were more documents or not, right? Why was there no raid? Why were we not told? Why was this kept secret and quiet until after the midterm election? It was kept quiet for a month, actually 2 months. This was kept quiet for 2 months. Why? Why were the documents all over the place? And how did they get there? The Penn Biden Center didn't open until February of 2018. Joe Biden left the White House in January of 2017. Who had those documents? How were they kept? Who saw them? What's the chain of custody? And everybody's saying that what Trump did was worse. Well, Trump's documents, everything that was at Mar-a-Lago was packed by the National Archives and Records Administration.
Right.
And they were transported there by those people. And the Secret Service is at Mar-a-Lago, right? They're not in a storage shed at another property somewhere for 6 years. So I guess my question is, why the disparity in treatment? And do you think now, because they had to appoint a special counsel, do you think that this is Donald Trump's get out of jail free card?
So I want to go back to the very beginning. So I don't give Merrick Garland all that much credit because, like you said, I think he had to do this. I don't really think this is him really sticking his chest out for the American people. I believe he had to do this. So that's point number one. And
Right.
You go back to that timeline. It's fascinating because your first question is, why didn't the National Archive know they were missing? Well, somebody should have to answer for that. We need to know, well, if they don't know that's missing, what else is missing that they're not aware of or not supposedly aware of? Thus, what are we not aware of? So that needs to be addressed immediately. Who's in charge of this and why did they not know these documents are missing? Point number three about the midterms, it's so ironic, again, that like in 2020, Facebook and FBI and Twitter, they all said, well, we're not going to look into the laptop right now. We'll do it later. Then, like, you have these outlets a year later, all of a sudden confirm that was Hunter Biden's laptop and the Biden family is overtly corrupt. So either this is just a coincidence or Biden's the luckiest guy ever because every time election comes around, people just seem to not reveal and want to look into what the inner workings of his family is going on. You bring up that garage. I don't know if people saw, but around 6:30, Fox News had a report that Hunter Biden was in that garage where those documents are supposedly stored. So Hunter has access to it. That means a lot of foreign countries that he dealt with may also have access to it. We just don't know, particularly when you're dealing with someone like Hunter Biden, who I think is just an ominous character altogether. So many questions are arising and need to be answered. And I want to go back to another one. I see the press go in and defend Biden saying, well, what Trump did was worse. Look, step back for a minute. Before we get into Trump, let's discuss what's going on with Biden. Just because you can use Trump as a ironic Trump card does not dismiss Biden for what he did. So I see so many people neglect and reject the conversation about Biden by automatically going to Mar-a-Lago. I'm happy to have that conversation, but let's learn and talk about what Biden did right now before we use whataboutism.
Exactly. And that's what I love. I love that the left is always like, oh, what about it? Like they
Right.
deride it until it
Right.
comes in handy and then they throw it out there.
Right.
Yes, it was November, not April. Thank you, Al. Al says the doc's taken as a CYA operation. Does it protect Hunter? It's a great question. It's interesting that this is all coming out now as the Republicans, back in November 4th, a week before the election, a week or so before the election, the midterms, everyone thought there was going to be this huge red wave. So Democrats are probably afraid of the Republicans getting the Senate, the House, and the Senate. And they knew there were going to be investigations because the Republicans said we're investigating the Biden crime family, right? So they were afraid of that. So I don't think it's a coincidence that now, 6 years after they took these documents, suddenly they're just suddenly finding them. Why were Biden's lawyers in his office in the Penn Biden Center now? Why were they there?
We don't know that. And I love that word coincidence because one of the first things I really realized when I got out of high school and college is coincidence don't really exist. A coincidence is basically an excuse. There's usually a reason why something happening. So I don't believe the excuse that oh they just so happened to come out 2 months after the midterms. I don't believe that. I absolutely believe there was a concerted effort for this not to come out early in November, and it didn't. So yeah, I don't believe that the people who are using it saying, "Oh, this is just a coincidence." I never buy that as an excuse. But in general, I don't believe that term really has much merit. And yeah, there's just so many questions. Again, ironically, from the start of our conversation, that we just don't have answers to. And you bring up the Penn Biden Center. We don't even know much about that. And I think that for the people reading the story, information on what's going on there and who's running it, who's in charge, who's benefiting from it, that's a fourth conversation we need to be had because as of right now, there's so much ambiguity around that center.
Yeah, James says the National Archives should know every time any person requested anything, that and anytime anything was removed. Exactly. And by the way, Joe Biden had zero authority. He had as much authority as Hillary Clinton to remove or keep any kind of classified documentation. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has that ability because he can declassify anything he wants because he was the president when that happened. Al says it's coming out now because it's the way to keep Joe from running again. I think Al's right. I think this is the Democrats signaling we're done with Joe. He was our useful idiot. He got us where we want to be. They're grooming Gavin Newsom so that the whole country can be California. Yay. And, he's photogenic. He can remember where he is because the bar's low. Let's face it. I mean,
Yeah.
I look at Fetterman and Joe Biden, and I'm like, that's the bar to become a politician for the Democrats. So Gavin Newsom, I think, is their best bet, and I think that that's who they're grooming to be next. And I think he's right. I think they're done with Joe.
So do I, and I don't think so. I don't believe Democrats ever liked Joe. If you go back to the early primaries, remember the Democrats in the left wing media, they were the first ones to question Joe Biden's cognitive decline. They didn't like Joe Biden. They dismissed him as an old white guy who forgets things and all that. They didn't embrace Joe until it was down to him and Bernie Sanders. They knew that he would fare better in a general election. So I don't think the left and Democrats have ever been really on Joe Biden's saddle, but he eventually became, like you said, the best option for them, they thought, given how weak the bench is. So I believe they will turn on Biden the moment they believe it's advantageous. And I believe in 2024, the time will be advantageous because propping him out there again and having him as your candidate is hardly confident for any Democratic voter. Even if you hate Trump, you hate DeSantis, we'll see who opposes him. You cannot convince the country that Joe Biden, 4 more years of that Joe Biden, is the best route for any country.
Yeah, I agree. So I found an interesting piece on the Penn Biden Center. Within weeks of leaving the vice presidency in January 2017, Biden became the Benjamin Franklin Presidential Practice Professor at the University of Pennsylvania, was an honorary position, and the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement was launched in Washington, D.C. the following year. Now, according to emails from Hunter Biden's laptop, this is all done by Fox News Digital. According to those emails from Hunter Biden's laptop, on April 25th of 2016, Creative Artists Agency, which is a big talent agency out of LA, an agent for them named Craig Gehring emailed Hunter with, quote, confidential notes from our meeting, in which Gehring listed apparent plans that were discussed for the vice president upon leaving office. So they've got a talent agency involved here. One of the plans included, quote, wealth creation, unquote, with no further explanation. And another plan included an apparent reference to the Penn Biden Center in Washington, D.C., with a possible job opportunity for Hunter. Hunter's everywhere, including the garage. Let's see. The Biden Institute, this is a quote, Gehring's email said, the Biden Institute of Foreign Relations at the University of Pennsylvania focus on foreign policy. In addition to the Institute at U of Penn, the school has an existing office in D.C. that will be expanded to house a D.C. office for VP Biden, parentheses, and Mike, Hunter, and Steve, question mark. Operates like the Clinton Global Initiative without the money raise. Hunter confirmed Gehrig's notes, but emphasized that they need to be, quote, very confidential, unquote, because they were not set in stone. This is what Hunter replied. He said, in theory, that's the way I would like to see it shake out. But please keep this very confidential between us because nothing has been set in stone and there's still a lot of sensitivity around all of this, both internally and externally. He hasn't made any decisions, and this could all be changed. This could all be changed overnight. Now, just 10 days earlier before this conversation, remember, this is at the end of the Biden vice presidency, Hunter was scheduled to attend a meeting with his father, and at the time, the president of Penn, Amy Gutmann. This is from Hunter's schedule on his infamous laptop. It's not clear if the meeting at the White House actually took place, but it was scheduled almost exactly 1 year after Hunter and his, at the time, wife, Kathleen, hosted that president, Amy Gutmann from UPenn, for a private dinner at Cafe Milano, which is a place where a lot of these meetings happened in Washington, D.C. According to an April 2015 email from a Penn official to Kathleen and Hunter and his wife, the guest list, quote, comprised of Academy members, parentheses, significant donors, trustees, overseers, and Penn parents, unquote, from UPenn, another email read. Now, Joe left the presidency January 20th, 2017. He was hired as a professor at Penn less than 4 weeks after that, where he was paid a total of $776,527 in 2017, and the same in 2018, which is nearly double what full-time Penn professors made at the same time. Now, Philadelphia Magazine reported at the time that the former vice president's professorship was really more of a speaking residency, and that he's been on campus so infrequently that it becomes news when he's actually there. He was there a total of 6 times. I did the math. Each time he stepped foot on that campus, he earned $258,842.33.
Not a bad gig.
No, I wish I could get that gig, actually. Let's see. They had their official opening in February 2018, as I said earlier. Joe's at that opening said that he had spoken with Gutmann, the university president, Amy Gutmann, who he had met with previously, and Hunter had met with her when he was still vice president, about becoming a professor and being able to bring his own team with him to UPenn. Here's what he said. Listen to the names. Serious staff people and much more than staff. They start with Tony Blinken and Steve Ricchetti and others. So thank you for allowing me to bring along some really, really bright people. In 2019, Biden took unpaid leave of absence from Penn after he announced his presidential campaign. Now, as president, since he's been president, Biden selected the former university president of UPenn, Amy Gutmann, to be the U.S. ambassador to Germany. David Cohen, the former chair of Penn's board of trustees, was also at the Penn Biden Center opening. He was tapped by Biden to be the U.S. ambassador to Canada. Interesting how there's a lot of paybacks. At least 10 senior Biden administration officials have been hired to their current or former positions after working at the Penn Biden Center, including the current Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Colin Kahl, White House Director Stephen Ricchetti. Blinken and Ricchetti both served as managing directors, while Kahl was a strategic consultant at the center. Interesting.
You reading that, it unfolds just like a true crime podcast, right? Like every paragraph, right? Like it keeps hinting at more and more, and you just know corruption is embroiled with every figure. I got thinking there, we discussed the comparisons of the Trump docs. Remember when Biden did that interview with 60 Minutes and he used his Vito Corleone voice saying, how could anyone take declassified information? What an irresponsible act. Well, what you sort of describe also reminds me of Vito Corleone, where if you're loyal to me, I'll take care of you for life, which sounds like everybody involved with that Biden Penn Center was taken care of later for staying quiet. So like I'm a fan of Vito Corleone, not a fan of Joe Biden, but there are some comparisons that are pretty eerie.
Yeah, absolutely. Al says Biden was the best Trojan horse the Democrats could find. I agree. I agree
too.
James says many Democrats didn't care didn't much care for Joe because they couldn't figure out how having pancakes in the morning means you're scared of toasters because of a swaying palm tree means the dog ran away. Dog face pony soldier. All right, there's more. Are you ready?
I am. This is episode 2 of the podcast.
Yes, this is the next part. All right. So Penn took in roughly 77 million in gifts and contracts between 2014 and 2020. So 6 years, 77 million from China. Interesting how China keeps cropping up with Joe Biden. Foreign donations to the university tripled in the 2 years after the center opened in 2017, with most of the money coming from China. Penn struggled to explain a $3 million donation from 2019 from a Hong Kong shell company that's tied to a Chinese national and a businessman named Zhu Zuqing. A university spokesperson previously said the donation came from a Chinese national named Jin Zhao, but the Free Beacon reported it could not identify a connection between Jin Zhao and the corporation where the gift originated from. So what they did a little digging into what the Penn said, where it came from. The university also received at least 12.8 million in gifts from China between March of 2020 and June of 2022. And this is according to a review of the Department of Education's foreign gift reporting database. The university reported at least another 2.8 million in China contracts between July 2020 and January 22. So they're getting a lot of money from China. That all most of it started with the Penn Biden Center opening. The Penn's Vice President of Communications, Stephen McCarthy, told Fox News Digital in a statement, the Penn Biden Center has never solicited or received any gifts from any Chinese or other foreign entity. In fact, the university has never solicited any gifts for the center. He said that since its inception, 2 American donors provided 3 unsolicited gifts totaling $1,100 for the Biden Center, and that 100% of the center's budget is from university funds. Well, that just doesn't seem to be true if you look at some of the questions about some of these donations from China.
Yeah, we watch like a Lifetime movie. There's always like that person who you mentioned, and people jump when they hear her name. Usually she's like down the street, redhead, and really evil. That's almost like with Hunter Biden. Every time you hear his name, you just know the story's about to turn in a bad direction. Like wherever he's references, it's never good.
So let me ask you, all that being said, we know now there's a special counsel investigating Biden. And I think that they're going to have to let Donald Trump off the hook because of these revelations about Joe, right? So Donald Trump's going to have to be let off the hook. If they don't, I think it's just going to be riotous in this country. It's going to be a bad thing if they treat Trump differently than Biden. They just make him more of every time they do it, they make Trump more of a victim and they empower him every single time. They think they're hurting him and they are just like reinforcing his superpowers. Go ahead.
Everything they've accused Donald Trump of from the start, they're guilty of themselves. I think this is just another example. No matter what it is, and 100%. This is a trend from politics, really, I would say the left is always so quick to say you're guilty of this, and you find out, whether it be a week later, a month later, a year later, they're guilty of what they're accusing them of, and particularly Trump. So when I first saw this story, I was not surprised at all. I'm like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense, especially given Biden's CBS interview where he said, how dare anybody ever take classified documents? So, this doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, the hypocrisy remains astounding just because every time there's a quote unquote scandal, they reveal themselves to be responsible for arguably an even bigger scandal.
Oh, well, I always say hypocrisy is a superfood for the left, right? They thrive on it, they live on it, and they get away with it. So I can't blame them. They get away with it. If you keep getting away with bad behavior, you're going to repeat that bad behavior. But here's my prediction, and I want to know if you agree with me or not. I predict that this investigation is slow walked, and they're going to walk this until they think 2024, when they think they can take over the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and then it all dies. Any investigation into Hunter, Penn Biden Center, the documents, the whole thing dies because they're going to slow walk everything to prevent Republicans from finding out the truth. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I'll take it a step further. I think what you're going to see with this, not only are they going to slow walk it, they're not going to have much incentive to speed it up because so much of this is dictated by media pressure and outrage. And because Joe Biden's side manipulates and has control of, I would say, 80-90% of the media marketplace, they're going to be able to dictate the messaging that's coming out. So I absolutely agree. I don't expect any results anytime soon, but I do think this and really his entire presidency does lead to Democrats in the left dumping this guy before 2024, as the commenter predicted.
100%, 100%. But then we get Kamala. Oh dear Lord, she's just as ineffective as he is, and they're not. Neither one of them's running the show, so it doesn't matter. James here says, great guest. Went to Twitter to add him to my follow list. Tell everybody how to find you on Twitter.
Well, so Mary, I think you set me up there because we had this conversation before. I don't have a very good Twitter name. It's at Burack Bobby _. For whatever reason, when I joined Twitter, somebody already had my name. So I've been stuck with this at Burack Bobby _, which makes me look like some avid Reddit message board loser, but I can't change it. I've requested it, no feedback. I'm stuck with the _ right now. So yeah, whoever has the at Bobby Burack, I think the guy has like 2 followers. He won't give it up. So
yeah, so it's Burack Bobby Bobby, and then a line, then a line, an underscore, not a dash, an underscore after it. Is it better to just make it one as opposed to underscore? Because a lot of people don't know what an underscore is. They're like, well, what
problem is if you use the 1, they think you're on Tinder. That's a Twinder name. You add the numbers at the end. So underscore.
What?
Yeah. If you use Tinder, usually you have to add some numbers at the end of your name. So if you put that handle under my name on an interview, they'll think you're giving up my Tinder handle, not my Twitter handle. So the underscore has to remain.
I've never heard of such a thing before. Yeah. Then again, I'm old and not on Tinder. So that's probably why I don't know about such a thing. And that's just weird. But, here, Ron says he had no problem finding you.
Well, that's because it's the underscore, right? If I would have put a number, he would have had a much harder time. And by the way, I do want to inform your listeners and viewers, I really appreciate hanging out with them. About a month ago, I wrote a story about Christmas shoppers returning gifts. And I made a note in there. Oh, we talked about it. Yeah, we talked about it. That what's going on right now with the advent of online shopping, you have women ordering clothes the same kind and style, but they might order a medium and a large or a red and a blue. Then they return the one they don't want. Well, a lot of people got mad at me and you came to my defense. I really appreciate that. You really helped me out against the Twitter mob.
Anytime. Yeah, I do it. I can't help it because it depends on the manufacturer. And just because a lot of sites now to avoid that are asking you, like, who do you order the most clothes from and what's your size in their size?
Oh,
and then they tell you, okay, so you need to order a 4 in our size or a 6 in our size if you normally, so they're I guess they're kind of cooperating a little bit, but as I said to you, it's their own damn fault because they don't standardize sizes. So until they standardize sizes the way they standardize men's sizes, like, you're 32 long, 32 waist, done, right? That's a universal. So until they do that, there you go. So, all right, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much. I hope we get to do this again. Fox has given you the okay, so I hope we get to have you on again. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I really did.
Same here. We'll talk soon.
All right, let me tell everybody, don't forget to go to Mary Walter Radio. Look for Mary Walter Radio on Twitter. Look for Burack Bobby _ on Twitter. And please like the podcast. Please subscribe, tell your friends, and you can download the audio on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I will be on the Chris Salcedo Show Monday between 4:30 and 5 o'clock Eastern Time on Newsmax TV. And on Tuesday, same way you watch this podcast, will be Life with Mary Walter, the non-political podcast. If you're up for it, I would have you come and co-host that with me too, because it's no politics. We talk relationships, we talk all sorts of different things, everything but politics. So I don't know if you're up for that. We do that too.
Of course, and I'm going to explain to you the rules of Tinder on that podcast.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that would be so much fun. All right, we're definitely going to do that. So I will keep you in the loop on that one. Thank you so much. Everybody have a fantastic weekend. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.